Hi, I'm Claude,
And I'm Edzo, and you're listening to FamTalks.
where we talk about faith through apologetics and share it with you as our ministry. We hope to encourage families to talk about big questions on faith to counter the worldview from a word view.
Yes, that's right, and that's why today we have prepared an interesting question. And that question would be: does God work in mysterious ways? If you find this question interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so that you would be notified for whenever we upload next. So, Mom, have you ever heard of this saying before that God works in mysterious ways?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a song, in a sense, about mysterious ways. Yeah.
Mm. Well, for me at least, when I've heard of these sayings, it's how people would kind of explain the kind or the unexplainable or situations that they find themselves in. Like they would experience something that's very sad, something that's very tragic, and they would say that God works in mysterious ways because they don't know why God is going to be using these kinds of circumstances, right? The reason behind the kind of circumstances that they're in, it's unknowable. They can't see the whole picture, they can't see the big picture, so they kind of say that God works in mysterious ways. I can't explain to you why these are happening, right? Only God can. And God works in mysterious ways, so we'll leave it at that, right?
Yeah. I think partially there's truth to that, given that we're a finite human being, that we won't be able to know everything, but clearly God knows everything. But I think the danger about this belief, or maybe accepting this as a truth, that we might not really see God for who he is, right? There are certain things that we will not be able to understand, but putting that general statement or accepting that God works in mysterious ways seems to imply that everything is God's doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the danger with that is that clearly everything is not God's doing. Given the fact that from creation, He created everything that was good. But because of sin, there was the distortion of good. So, in a sense, some of the things that we might be experiencing could actually be certain consequences of past choices that we had, or maybe it's just the distorted nature of where we are at right now with how the world is moving towards, I don't know how to clearly describe it, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm still hopeful with where we are at now. But I think that's the danger part of concluding or just assuming or just putting that blanket statement that God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Mom, and most definitely with the part where you said that it becomes a blanket statement, right? That with everything that is unexplainable to you, that's not fully understandable by you or by us,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of blanket it that God works in mysterious ways. That's just how it is, right? And then just stopping there, right? And I think that's always a dangerous thing. That whenever you kind of stop thinking about it, whenever you kind of stop pursuing, right, the kind of these kinds of questions, I think that's when it becomes dangerous, right? Yes, it's true that we're not really able to fully understand the reason behind these
Mm-hmm.
things. We're not able to fully understand, right, why we would be experiencing the kinds of things. Why are we maybe perhaps the victims in some sort of
Mm-hmm.
sense, right?
Yeah.
Why do we have to experience all of these pains, all of these hardships? It's true we're not going to be able to fully understand that. But that doesn't mean that we should stop we should stop thinking about it, or we should stop reflecting on it. That doesn't mean we should just stop trying to know more about it just because God is mysterious, just because we are finite, just because we are limited, doesn't mean that we need to, again, stop ourselves there, right? So if we are not supposed to stop ourselves there, how do we go forward? How are we going to look past or look beyond these quote unquote mysterious ways? Right? And I think that one of the things that we could or at least one of the things that we could look at would be the kind of heart that God has, right? That always looking back to the heart of God. Because yes, we might not be able to fully understand God's methods. We're not able to fully understand the methodology that God has for pruning us, for testing us, for helping us,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we always know, right, the kind of end goal that God has in mind, right? The kind of heart that God has. Right? God is always consistent. He is always the same yesterday, today, tomorrow, forever and ever. God will always be the same. Right? That's why we can be sure that God's heart will always be the same. Perhaps God's methodologies would be different based on the people, based on the circumstances. That's why we may not be able to fully understand that. But the reasons behind the different kinds of circumstances that we find ourselves in would always be the same, right? It's
Mm.
always to bring us back to God. It's always to make sure that we have that personal and that strong kind of relationship with God. It's always so that we would be pointed back to who God is, right?
Mm.
So to say that God is or God works in mysterious ways, I think that's very misleading, right? Because it kind of separates us from God. It kind of makes that distance from God. That because we don't understand something, we leave it at that, right? That blanket statement that if we apply it to everything that happens, then at some point you're going to grow distant from God. If
Mm.
you don't understand or you don't even try to understand where God is coming from, then you are going to grow distant from. But I guess it's just comes as a reminder to all our listeners and to us as well, Mom, that God is consistent, right? That the way He works will always be consistent with the word that He has given us through the Bible. So I guess to sum up everything that I've said, right? That yes, God works in mysterious ways, but that doesn't mean that we can't understand where He's coming from, because we can always look to the heart of God, which would be consistent in the kind of heart that God has had throughout the Bible.
Well said, my son. I think in a nutshell, you're pointing out that we can know his doing in a way
Mm-hmm.
that by reading his word, I think that's the main thing. We need to go back to his word to fully know who he is. In a sense, like when you have a relationship with someone, you know something about that person. A good
Mm-hmm.
example, me and your dad, you know, the Lord says that when you become married, like two people becoming one. But you know, interestingly, my son, even if God sees us as one, I won't be able to fully know your dad. But I
Mm-hmm.
know his character. I know that he's faithful. I know that he's loving. I know that he got my back at all times. But there are certain things that I wouldn't know about him. Does that mean that he works in mysterious ways? Not exactly. I would know definitely like everything that your dad will be doing throughout the day because I know his schedule. He brings me to work, picks me up, and then He does amazing things for us. He's taking good care of us. But in the midst of all those, right, I wouldn't know what he's thinking. I wouldn't know possibly what's running in his head. But when he makes certain decision, I know that it will go back to his nature or his character. So in the same way with God, I think there are certain things that he revealed to us through his word that we will be able to know his heart about certain things. I know that he wants the best for us, but this when we say the best, what would that be? That would mean to develop us into Christ likeness. He wants us to live in abundance, but that doesn't mean that abundance will be here in this earthly realm, but there's an assurance of abundance in the next life, eternal rewards, right? So, God's heart, He had revealed His heart through His word. But the question is, are we taking the time to get to know Him so that the
Mhm.
mysterious will not be a mysterious anymore to us,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, and for me, Ma, I just really like how you kind of listed down different promises, right, that God had made to us, like promises that we can claim, promises that we can be sure that we have, right,
Mm,
that there are blessings waiting for us in heaven, that there's abundance waiting for us. But that doesn't mean that that abundance will be here and now. Doesn't mean that we're going to be enjoying our lives here and now, right? Perhaps it would be a mystery to other people that, oh, God said, God promised these things, but how come I'm not receiving them now? If you're not, or if you don't know God well enough, then yes, those things are going to be a mystery, right? And I like how you said what you said, Mom, a while ago with your example with Dad, right? That you don't know exactly what's running in his mind. I don't either, right? But we know that in every decision that he makes, it's always going to be consistent with his character. It's always going to be consistent with his beliefs, with his strong belief that his family would always come first,
mm,
right? And that's what I admire about my dad. Always keeping or always putting our family first, especially
mm,
in every decision that he makes. Even when it comes to dinner at night, he's always thinking about that,
yeah.
right? So I guess we can kind of wrap up now our kind of conversation that does God work in mysterious ways? Well, there's truth in that. But does God only work in mysterious ways? No, definitely not. We could always find the kind of heart that God has. We can always look into the kind of heart that God has throughout the heart or through the heart that He has revealed to us in the Bible.
Mm,
We may not know the exact details of every decision God makes. We may not know what's running in His head, but we can rest assured that every decision God makes will always be in line with His character. So, to end our conversation, do you know the character of God?
that's a very good question. Yeah, so thank you for listening.
Yeah, and I think that would be all for now. So, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again in our next video.
Bye for now.